May I have your attention? Thank you for your attention.
Yeah, well, you asked for it. Now you're cutting it, and now it's back to the asinine behavior.
All right, scream ahead, Aku.
Hi.
Don't be so enthusiastic. we can't hold the energy here.
This is Finnish energy for you.
Finnish energy. It takes me back all those years. The first time that Karri approached me relating to this podcast, he was like, "Can somebody help me? I would like to do a film podcast. Can somebody? Is somebody feeling like he or she could become my co-host?" That was kind of like, yeah, okay.
Here I go again.
Here I go again.
Second time slaving for me.
It was the exact same level of enthusiasm.
So, I'm Karri, if you didn't happen to know. My co-host is Henrik, and the guy who's actually hosting this episode, well, he has already fired us, I presume. Aku, my brother, from the same goddamn mother. Welcome back.
Allegedly from the same mother. Never proven in a court of law. But
Presume it.
assuming, yes. So, if you could stop talking now, I could get to my business.
Okay.
So 176 years of podcasting and 5 episodes. Or was it the other way around? And,
Close enough.
I may have my notes mixed up. But, and you are from Finland, yes. Correct.
Yeah, allegedly.
Okay. So we'll start this off by
Bye.
asking how long is this gonna take? Yeah.
If the typical episode runtime is anything to give you a guide by, most likely forever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't watched any of those, but thanks for letting me know.
Yeah.
It's okay, neither have I.
Gosh darn it, Henrik. I think like 20 episodes ago we were discussing how we want to slash the episode length and make like less than an hour episodes. And look what has happened in the last episodes. We're back to the 2-hour mark.
Well, we haven't crossed the 7-hour mark since Hellraiser sequel.
What the fuck?
How about those Hellraisers? How much did you enjoy them on a scale from 1 to 0?
I think Henrik legitimately hated me after we did that episode, and those movies are absolute shit for the most part.
There are some good ones. I'm more positive on the franchise than the average show, and in this case also Karri. Like I see that there's a definite swamp when it comes to quality in Hellraiser franchise, but it's kind of like a roller coaster. It goes really high, it goes really low, and then it gets a little bit high near the end.
Okay, so that's the way we're gonna start the episode, calling me average Joe in the first 2 minutes.
And actually, I want to take this whole hour to talk about just Hellraiser movies. If that's okay.
Oh my god. What is there to talk about?
We haven't yet covered the most recent one.
Do we have to?
Yeah. And talking about movies, you've covered too many, I would say.
Yeah. Totally jaded here.
I've seen it all.
What was the worst review you had to do, if not including the Hellraiser, which obviously destroyed you?
That's a good question.
Of course it is.
Was obviously uninvited with that cat movie, that cat horror movie on a ship. I don't know, Aku, if you have seen it at one point. That's not actually one of the worst movies that we have covered for sure, but that's what I'm thinking.
I remember I was pretty damn hard on Uninvited, but I must confess, like, my gripes with the movie aside, it was not the worst movie that we have ever covered. I don't know actually what would be the worst film on this podcast, because there's been so many and they have been so bad.
And it's probably not even Zombie Strippers, you horrible human being.
No, actually, I think that Zombie Strippers actually is one of the best movies that we have covered here. I would like my personal list of important art in the history of human race. There is, like, when it comes to films, it's Schindler's List, followed closely by Zombie Strippers.
Gotcha.
Those are two quite from the same genre movies, Schindler's List and Zombie Strippers. It's serious business, this podcasting thing. So I'd like to ask now that, like I said, 176 years later, you all look amazing compared to that. If you could go back in time, would you start
in time
podcast?
To the...
If you could press a reset button, would you do this podcast again?
Why would I do it again? We already did it.
I don't know, actually.
Knowing what I know now and then starting another podcast, more or less like that, right?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Perhaps, yeah.
I don't know. I would look for some other things to do.
I mean, it's kind of a question, like, if you would have the possibility of pushing the reset button, would you do the flick lap again, as we have done it up until this point? And I honestly don't exactly know. Like, despite my constant joke here, telling how film podcasting is a never-ending hellscape, and I absolutely want to kill myself in the beginning of every single episode, I honestly don't really hate doing the flick lap. I actually quite enjoy it. But the real question is that some of these episodes, especially the early years, they were quite brutal. When we did like an episode per week.
Yeah, you mean the pacing and what else?
The pacing and the background work, when we still were kind of just learning the ropes, learning how to maximize your time when doing the background research and all of that. And like, it just kind of was, it was kind of a tumble dryer that we were back in those days.
Yeah.
And that amount of work, perhaps, is something that I would not choose to do a second time.
Yeah, I think back in those days we had a huge drive to try and prove ourselves as a podcast, and look at how much background research we are putting into this, and we truly did. It was freaking abysmal, to the point that it probably got rid of most of the listeners as well. But, no one was complaining about the lack of background research. Oh, it was there. And people who were talking about that, they agreed. He wasn't kidding about the background details.
Yeah. And even today, like, I don't know, I want to say that we have cut back on doing the background research. Still is a crazy amount, but these days we have kind of learned how to do it at this point, like how to maximize your efficiency and what sources to use and what search terms to use in order to, and in case of doing that, we have kind of learned how not to spend 3 hours from your day on wrong Google search terms or looking at the links and sources that in the end do not benefit you. and not reading the bad reviews that don't actually have any food for your own thought and all of that. We have kind of learned how to not to mess with that.
Yeah, I have to say on my part, I never managed to be consistent about the way I approach the background research for each episode. Like for one episode I might be reading, but then other times I might be just looking at the movie as is and then coming up with my thoughts on how that compares to the other movie, and it's all over the place. So I can't tell you what is my process and how I end up with the episode that I end up with then with you, but somehow we get there, for better or worse.
Well, that brings me to my next question, which you said you can't answer, so this is going to be great. So, the process of picking up movie and then all the work behind it before you get to the episode. Well, I know from that one episode, which is probably your most liked one, which I participated in, Jeepers Creepers.
Yeah.
I know what I did before that. I watched the movie, then I watched it again and I paused it, did some notes, then I checked out the Wikipedia page. That's about it. So how do you guys choose the movie, or who chooses it? Do you flip a coin? And then the procedure after that before you get to the actual podcast?
Well, most of the time I pick the movies not because I want to dominate here the decisions, but maybe I'm just more vocal about it, or Henrik has nothing against my suggestions. Sometimes I ask Henrik to provide his own suggestions, and sometimes when my suggestions just plain suck, then he's telling that to put the brakes and change it to something else.
Yeah, usually the process of choosing the movies is a complete chaos. It's not nearly as well constructed process as one might perhaps think from the films that we eventually end up covering here on the podcast, which does create a very well organized and orderly catalog of episodes.
It's a constant shit show. Like
it's a constant shit show.
Most of the time when we stop recording the episode, then I'm like to Henrik, like, "Are you busy? Are you busy? Do you want to chat a little bit?" And then we go on for 300 hours about should it be this, or should we select these movies, or what kind of theme we want to do, and should we go to China now, or should we go back to America, or should we go to Korea? And then Henrik is like, "No more Korea, please." So, what were the follow-up questions?
Thanks for listening. So, after choosing the movie, what are steps after that until to the point of recording of the podcast? So, like I mentioned, I obviously watch the movies, take some notes, but you have something probably more interesting than just that. Well, you better have something more interesting.
Well, it's as exciting as, we watch the movies, we take notes, and we push the record button. But yeah, there are some minute details there, but Henrik can go on that.
Yeah, when we started with this, we had the habit to watch the movie like 3 times before recording. So the first one was a blind watch, and then we had like the second watch during which we would take the notes, and then we would do the background work, and mostly during the background work, or just after the background work and just before the recording session, we would watch the movie for the 3rd time, just to get a clear image and kind of a look at like how our notes and how our background work combines with the 3rd watching of the movie. Like what kind of a synergy we can find from there. These days, when we are way lazier, or at least I am, I usually check the movie twice. The first one is the blind watch. Then I watch it the second time or the first one is blind watch, followed by me kind of writing down my first initial thoughts and feelings about the film. Kind of like the gut reaction that the movie got out of me. Then there is the second watch, during which I take the close notes. Kind of minute by minute. I take the time marks and write down like whatever piqued my mind, what I found interesting. What is there something that I found perplexing that the movie does not answer? Is there some kind of question that came into my mind that I have to look up after the second viewing? And then it's background work. It's Wikipedia articles, it's YouTube videos, it's in reading the interviews of usually the director, sometimes also the cast, but mostly just director and writer, because time is still on a limit. And then it's kind of like after that, it's just combining all of that, combining my own gut reaction things and kind of building them up into some type of a sentence, some type of a statement that I can make, taking the background work and the research, looking at it to my minute-to-minute notes, kind of seeing how those play together. And if I have time, I try to do some reading surrounding the themes that I've picked up from the movie. Like, what would be a good example? We did the Matrix episode. Matrix being heavily philosophical movie, so I didn't manage to read like Plato completely, but I did read up one book from philosophy that mostly tackled the philosophical themes of Matrix.
Yeah.
Or when we were dealing with propaganda, I read a book, was it Perivihollinen, or what was the name of it? Which basically was a Finnish academic. It was a master's thesis book concerning about how the Russian people were portrayed in the Finnish wartime propaganda. And I don't remember if that was for... was it Pretty Village or Pretty Flame, or what was the episode for which I read that one? And then, of course, sometimes there are the direct ones, the obvious ones. Like when we did Coriolanus, which was a Shakespeare film adaptation. So, of course, we also read the original text, the play. But can't promise that I managed to read a book for every single episode that we do. But whenever I managed to find the time, I try to also do that as a part of the background work process.
Yeah, now that you mentioned it, depending on the episode, it might require some kind of heavier reading. Like, we've been joking that if we ever do any films related to Bible, we would read the whole Bible, but hasn't come to that point yet.
There's a reason why we haven't done it.
There's also a reason why we haven't done Lord of the Rings so far.
Yeah, and sometimes we actually manage to cheat mode here a bit. Like, for example, the James Bond episodes. Whenever they are based on Ian Fleming book, we have gone through the book. But usually there we choose the audio book format and just to listen to it instead of actually reading it, because listening to it is a bit faster process, especially if you speed up the book, like 1.5 speed.
Yeah, I guess of course it depends from person to person, but for me, many times that is true, and you're kind of forced to concentrate on that and keep up with the pace that the audio is giving you. So yeah, well, at least when I read, I just tend to go back and forth. What was that? That was interesting. I'm gonna read that a little bit slower, then continue with the faster paced reading, so it's all over the place. But when it comes to the whole preparation, it's kind of similar to Henrik's. I usually watch the movie once, just sort of a blind watch. Might read the Wikipedia page first, IMDb page a little bit, and then just watch it. Probably not take many notes, if any. Then second watch, be a little bit more notes heavy on that watch, and then start browsing the internet, find out all the interviews and things like that. And when it comes to rare movies, I find that a little bit more satisfying because there's less material, of course, but I think there might be something that many people just haven't found yet, different connections, or movies that the director did in their old days, some short films that nobody freaking knows about, and I just found like a 20-page Korean document on it, and then I try to haphazardly translate it. It's all fun. Going digging.
Yeah. So pretty much a shit ton of work goes into the episode before you start recording?
I think our old friend Zach, he noticed that it's hella intensive.
It's too much, to be honest. It's too much.
Yeah, and he started his own podcast, and he did that for about a year, or what was it? And the last episode just came out, was it last month? And they have some new things going on, Zach and his friend that they were doing the podcast with. So good job, guys. 1 year, that's a hell of a run as well. And all the best for you.
Yeah, and what's most important when it comes to Zach's second podcast, With a Gay Twist, it did have the groundbreaking, earth-shatteringly good NATO episode where they managed to have a real expert.
Yeah, the undersigned.
It's the best discussion and analysis of NATO that I've actually ever heard.
But honestly, how was it? Was it that bad?
No. It honestly, it wasn't bad.
Okay.
All mean jokes aside, I actually do think, to be brutally honest, as the tagline goes, it's obvious that you weren't like a deep-earned academic on the questions of NATO, or you weren't a career general who has the deep background and 15 years of research about NATO behind your back. Obviously, yeah, that was clear as day, but it still wasn't a bad discussion when it came to NATO. Like if you don't expect that you are going to get like the academic take on the question that is NATO, if that's not your coming to point, I actually do think it's pretty damn good episode and pretty damn good discussion.
I kind of tried to emphasize that I'm not any kind of expert on this subject. I didn't have enough time, and considering it was probably 8 a.m. in the morning because of the damn time zones again, I had just woken up, barely had a sip of coffee. I was just completely out of my element, but something came out of it.
Well, you have watched a lot of James Bond, so you might be an expert.
I actually...
Yeah.
No.
And thank you for joining us. Any other questions? but what Henrik was about to finish with some very positive mentions about
I was going to mention that I actually do recommend anyone listening to our once again celebration episode. I actually do recommend that you honestly go out and listen With a Gay Twist. And I don't remember what was the episode number, but there is a good NATO discussion.
And much better NATO discussions with other guests who actually know their shit in that show. There's honestly some really solid material there that might be actually worth your while. So yeah.
Yeah, don't recommend it at all. But anyway, now I thought this was gonna be just an episode of talking shit about Zach. I haven't ever met the guy, but seen that was the way we were going. But yeah, kudos to you, Zach. But you made the biggest mistake of your life leaving this podcast.
Absolutely.
It's gonna take you to riches and fame. So now you have some sort of how would you call it? Synergy between you two.
I thought mental illness.
Yeah, and also huge issues which are concern of mine. But what would you say is the best thing about each other as a podcaster or as a podcasting partner?
Oh, okay. This is this kind of a love back and forth thing.
Karri lives on a time zone, which means that when we hit the record button here in Finland during 7 p.m., it's close to midnight at wherever Karri is living.
Yeah.
Meaning that after 2 hours, Karri is way too tired and he quickly closes his mouth.
That's the best thing.
That's the best thing. Don't ever say that I don't support you, man.
Yeah, that's probably true. The best things about Henrik, huh? Henrik is indeed deeply analytical here, and he certainly does his goddamn research every once in a while, at least. And he can go on for a 30-minute monologue here, for better or worse. Tell you the ins and outs about, I don't know, Nietzsche, or you already have a lot of background understanding about cinema, so that already helps. What could I say? Great Finnish sense of humor, very straightforward and no-nonsense approach, and really knows his things and comes prepared.
In all honesty, I do appreciate Karri's drive. And the fact that Karri... It's... At times we have clashed, like, behind the scenes, but... Even though despite all of that, I do actually quite admire how Karri can actually take the lead in a lot of questions and a lot of subjects, because that's not actually my forte. It's also something that shows up whenever we try to pick our movies, the future episodes. Karri usually does the picking, and part of the reason is that I'm actually terrible at making decisions.
So
Yeah.
Karri is like the dictator of the group.
Natural dictator.
I still feel the Mauser at my head here.
That's a gun, Karri.
Yeah.
So what would you say, let's say Henrik first, the worst thing about being a podcaster and the best thing?
The worst thing about being a podcaster, I would say, well, of course it takes a lot of time at the end of the day. And also, since podcast it's an audio format where you just put stuff on the internet, there is no ever actually a real connection with your listeners. That leads you into somewhat into a dark and murky territory where you don't actually know who is listening and what he or she is getting from what you are saying. Mm-hmm. Our input on our listeners, it's just statics. It's just numbers. 35% engagement. More than 100,000 listeners on episode X. Only few thousand on episode Y. It's our understanding of, if you think podcast as a sphere, and we would be in the center of it as the content providers. When it comes to everything else, when it comes to the rest of the sphere, our understanding of it basically just exists only on numerical facts and different type of graphs. It kind of makes it so that you constantly feel like you're talking to a void here. Because you never actually know what's on the other end. Except some type of a Google spreadsheet on how you did this week. Or how did you did this month. And that's basically, it's kind of a pain in the ass, really.
As long as you're looking at the statistics and approaching the whole podcast making from that point. And I suppose that hasn't been really how you've approached this from the beginning. And I'm the guy who tries to kind of follow on your footsteps here, that no, it's really not about the listeners. After all, we did do this for ourselves so that it is hopefully engaging for others as well. So that it's a passion project.
It is. And I would say that also is like the best thing on making a podcast. The fact that it is a passion project, and also the fact that you kind of can take the podcast into different directions. The format of the Flick Lab has this one. At this point, it has changed 3 or 4 times in total. And not crucial radical format changes necessarily that many. Flicklab has not changed from a movie podcast to a video game podcast or political podcast. And we have had like perhaps one major format change where we like let go of the deep dive into one episode, extremely deep dive into one film, episode structure, and instead we started to talk more about the roundabout themes surrounding the movie that we are talking about. But if we count in the minor changes, there have been, like, in my opinion, 3 to 4 in total times when the format has changed in some capacity. And I do think that flexibility is actually an advantage on the podcast format.
It's an advantage at least for us, so that we gonna keep the whole thing fresh for us, at least a little bit, so that we have that drive to go forwards, try something different, mix it up a little bit. I guess the biggest change that we have done is dropping the scene by scene, which we did have in Jeepers Creepers still, but we haven't done that in several years. On one hand, that's it has a beginning and an end. You can easily see where it's going, what we're gonna do next, and that might be engaging in its own way. On the other hand, there might be a lot of lull points where nothing really interesting is being said, or we get us stuck in these uninteresting details, really, whereas now we just look at the more overall picture. At least for me, it's more interesting this way.
And actually, speaking of Jeepers Creepers, before you get to your negatives, it might have been different when I did the podcast, because I was watching the movie as we did the podcast, so it's easy for me to talk about the scenes. But I didn't think about, is anybody else who might be listening like getting the same picture as me? It could sound very off-putting to somebody, especially if you haven't seen the movie.
Yeah. No, I think it was spot-on material. Well-deserved language.
Again, that actually is a running question. Kind of a nagging feeling at the back of your head whenever you actually stop recording the episode. Or at least week afterwards, when the episode is about to come out, you start to actually question yourself, what did I actually say in that episode back then? Is there something that can be actually misunderstood? Did I make a comment that I actually shouldn't have made? Did I make a joke about something that should not have been joked about?
Like the Holocaust.
A really good example.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you think you said something that might be offensive or just kind of borderline crazy, but then you release the episode and you're like, no reactions whatsoever. Okay, all right. Like
dodge that bullet once again. And then you later on you get the reactions, and people are like, what? Did you actually ask? Is this movie X a racist? What are you retards?
Yeah, I think what we should do even more now is just put into because the YouTube engagement, for example, gives us an indication that 95% of listeners fuck off after the first 30 seconds. So what we should do is we put in those 30 seconds all the nastiest claims that we are not even making in that episode, and then later we kind of correct ourselves. No, actually, we mean this.
Well, we don't even need to correct ourselves.
Yeah.
In the the episode comments, we can just say that we never said that.
Yeah.
What are you, a retard?
Yeah.
That actually would be a really good trolling.
Yeah. That would be.
So, Karri, did you get to your negatives yet?
Oh yeah, that thing from 100 years ago. So the negatives, editing. Absolutely have learned to fucking hate editing. It was something that I kind of loved back in like 20 years ago, just doing it as a hobbyist. Nowadays, after editing 176 episodes when this comes out,
yeah,
I'm like so fucking done with this. But at least I've gotten a lot better at it over the years, I would say. We have tried, God knows, we have tried at points to give this editing task to somebody else in India or wherever. And it's just never working out. It's still my baby, so...
So you didn't even offer to Henrik to do the editing?
I did.
I've actually done one episode, then Karri had to go and fix it.
Yeah. It was like I gave the reins to Henrik, then I didn't hear anything back from Henrik, and I was like, oh fuck, I guess I should just cut this episode by myself. Then when I finally I have edited it, mixed it, and it's ready for release, then Henrik is like, here's your episode. And I'm like, oh fuck. And then I listen through that, make the changes, and I'm like, yeah, it needs some work, but I'm gonna go with your version, basically.
So
about
movies.
Don't try to go anywhere here yet. So editing and background work. Actually, I hate that part in many ways. But all of that is paid back when we grab the mic, and it's kind of fun again. Until I have to edit it again. But yeah.
So
it's basically it's a like the situation is like it's 90% of the experience. It's pain in the ass, it's complete shit, but then you have like 10%, which is a good nice experience. That's the recording process.
And like you said, it's impossible to know who are the listeners, what do they want, and why do we sometimes get so negative response on something. I guess on YouTube it's kind of clear because we just have a still image there and then there's the audio playing, so many people may not have gotten acquainted to that kind of content there. I don't know. Maybe we just suck. There's also that possibility. But yeah, it's best parts is that it's also gratifying at points.
It's kind of like living in an abusive relationship.
It absolutely is.
The amount of listeners can be a shit ton or not at all. So I think your most viewed video is the Gods Must Be Crazy.
Yeah, it
almost
is.
half a mil, and the lowest is maybe like 2 views or whatever. What do you think? The leap is so high between the most and least.
That's also been a thing that we have been tackling with. I don't know how to tackle with it really, but the problem is that we release episodes on movies that somebody has either not seen or has seen. So when somebody goes to the YouTube algorithm and then wants to search for something movie related, they're probably searching for something that they have already seen. They have some kind of a touching point on it. Maybe they want to see it in the future, but I think those might be a minority of people. So that might explain the kind of wild shaking in the listener numbers, at least on YouTube. It's also the same in the actual podcast feed. So yeah. So I don't know what the solution is to that. I don't think there's any solution. It's just what it is.
I just don't care about it.
Yeah.
at all. That's my solution.
Yeah. But I think the newer format is a little bit more friendly towards that. Kind of overarching points, not so deep dive on one specific weird movie.
Yeah, and you also said this is a passion project, and so you would do it if you had no listeners or 1 million listeners anyway.
You know, man, after 5 years, you know, it kind of starts to take its toll a little bit on you, of course, that we still don't have nearly enough listeners. So I was just writing to my notes that I am committed to doing up to 200 episodes in this podcast. But at that point, we need to have a real heart-to-heart discussion on the direction. What do we want to do now? Like, is this it? Or is there more things to tell? More stories to learn? More stuff to study? Or is it also kind of a passion and devotion if you move from a project to another project. This is something that we haven't discussed before in this podcast, but just let's put it out there. The listener numbers are what they are. We will have to evaluate how long we want to do this and to what end. That discussion is not pertinent right now, but I think we're going to have a real discussion on it when we hit around the 200 episodes. So if you want us to keep going, make sure to freaking like us and listen to us and share the episodes and all that.
Yeah, I don't really, like I said, I don't care about the listener numbers, so I don't have a hot take to offer surrounding this team. I approach the whole podcast process. I approach the Flick Lab as a whole from a different angle than looking at like we would have to have a listeners. We would have to have some type of a mark that would show us that we are successful. It's something that I've talked with Karri before. I've asked her like, what is the driving goal for Karri personally? Why you wanna do this? Why do you wanna do Flick Lab? What do you want to achieve? And for me, that was a question that I asked when I started doing the Flick Lab. Before I said that, okay, fine, I joined the program. That was the question I asked, what I want to achieve. The answer that I came to now 176 episodes ago was that I wanted to use the podcast as a tool, basically to champion acceptance and use the movies as a tool for that. Right? From episode to episode, my driving goal is to somehow preach on the message. It doesn't matter who you are, what you are, what you have done, but there is value to us all, and there is a merit of accepting each other, accepting the flaws that we have, the personal flaws that each of us carry, accepting those flaws within ourselves and on somebody else. And I gotta feel like as long as managed to do that, at least on some capacity, whenever doing the podcast, I actually achieved the goal that I've set for myself. I've stayed true to my original mission statement. That's why I at times on these episodes I go into a weird rambling tangent on how this means that and that means and we should accept this. How Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence. The main point is that we should see the humanity in our enemy, and that is the only way how we can somehow achieve some type of victory. Yada 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 yada. Basically, those moments are me trying to stay true to my original mission statement, and as long as I manage to do that, like. We have 100 listeners, we have 0 listeners. It doesn't really matter to me as long as I can say at the end of a recording session that yeah, once again, I did an episode and what I said came still from the point of view that we should choose acceptance and we should accept ourselves and that the things are bigger than what they at first glance may appear for us to be. If I manage to say that, I'm happy with the podcast, with the episode, and I can say that I've achieved my own personal goal. And because of that, I easily can do and continue doing the Flick Lab as long as, you know, the Flick Lab goes on. If we would, after the 200 episodes, choose no longer continue this podcast, it would also be a choice that would be kind of easy for me to do. Like I achieved my personal goal. I had a message. I had a hammer that I used to bash the nail. Perhaps we have 0 listeners. It means it's a bad hammer, but I still did make an honest attempt, and I can continue using the hammer, or I can just throw it away and try to find a better hammer and move on. But I gotta have that freedom.
Yeah, I think. It's okay whatever we do. Every project is gonna have its kind of bookends. there's always a beginning and an end to something, and I'm perfectly fine with that. Of course, what you hear from my voice is also the frustration because I carry a lot of the tasks behind the backgrounds. I do the graphics, I do the editing, I do the publishing, etc. So that requires hours, and sometimes it is kind of really a pain in the ass. We haven't been successful in externalizing these tasks. They are still, everything is in-house, so yeah, it's a lot of work.
Yeah, it's a lot of work for a hobby, at least.
Yeah.
But I'm always happy to come along and pump those numbers up for you guys. So I am pretty well known in Finland, at least in my own house. Now, logical question to all of this podcasting thing is, why movie podcasts?
Well, that's a good question. I had been thinking for a while that I want to do something, some kind of a project that I could do with somebody. It could be like a YouTube project, could be like a podcast. Then I just needed a subject for that. Well, with the webpage that we did back in the day with Henrik, Vitonen.net, that was mainly for video games, but we also did have, and I think we mainly opened the movie reviews part there because Henrik joined and he was really interested in that thing, so I started contributing also on that part. And I've been also studying kind of filmmaking, and being the mighty media assistant that I am, I thought that it was kind of a natural project then to take on, as that might be the thing that you might be most well equipped to talk about. Yeah, there's definitely other things that I would love to talk about, but then I was like, yeah, why not movies?
The next project for us can be a political podcast.
Really?
Well, what I've actually checked out that the sphere of political podcasts, the range of political podcasts, you don't actually need any type of experience nor expertise to actually do that.
We have discussed this before, like maybe we should take like 2 years off and get some kind of a diploma and then start doing the political podcast.
I think that would already be like too much work, too much background work to actually do a political podcast. We should just start one and just go at it cold.
You know, man, I have nothing against it if we would do a video game show, because that might be in some ways more personal, more engaging for us even, because we need to take the control into our hands, and it could be like we play the game from beginning to end and then we discuss it.
I think.
Yeah. The only problem with that, the idea of playing the game.
I'm not gonna buy you the PC. Yeah.
Well, the second problem for us to play the game is also that games actually take quite a long time, especially knowing your tastes. Fucking Shenmue 3. I may not have 80 hours to put on a video game just so that I can do an episode to tell you exactly why the game in question sucks.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, and I think you would have to know about the new games also, not only just the first Tomb Raider and Sonic. Even though those are great games, but there's a lot of new games that have come out since 1995.
Unless we are a retro gaming podcast.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I know I dropped the ball kind of after, those gaming years. My last console was Xbox 360, so yeah.
Yeah. But you did have quite the impressive collection of old games, and
obviously
you had a Dreamcast and
yeah.
What else? That's the only one I remember. Yeah.
My first console was Mega Drive, and played Sonic 2 with it. Then I got Sega Saturn, I think the following year. I was such a spoiled brat. And then I got Nintendo 64 a few months after that, just to keep me at home, so Daddy would have more curry hours than Mommy.
Nintendo 64.
Nintendo 64.
Those are the magical memories of your childhood.
Yeah. And now this is starting to become a video game podcast too fast. Let's move along. Now, has this? I actually asked this last weekend for my brother, whose name is Karri, as I remember. Has this podcast sort of ruined movies for you?
No.
Like, are you able to enjoy those, or do you watch them more more critically? Let's say.
Well, in a more varied way, and I think movies were already ruined for me a little bit before I started my media studies. I mean, I kind of read about the subject quite a lot, and I watched documentaries, etc., etc., etc. So I knew how kind of things are made. But what this podcast has brought to the table is maybe more patience with movies, more love for many different kinds of genres, finding a lot of really interesting background stories or themes in different movies. Just watching movies has probably become more interesting and more richer after all this kind of digging. Definitely, I think. And for me, the best part about making this podcast might actually be all the history that we sometimes have to go through related to the episode. Maybe like Pretty Village, Pretty Flame, that's an easy example. We had to read about Bosnian War. Otherwise, it would have been a complete nightmare with our guest from Serbia. So we really needed to know our basic things at least. So learning about the world, learning about history of the world and opium wars and weird stuff like that.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that the Flick Lab has spoiled movies for me. I'm kind of with Karri on the fact that without the podcast, I wouldn't do so much research into every movie that I see.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't look at the historical facts behind most of the movies that I would watch. And that's also kind of the current case, that whenever I watch a movie that is not for the Flick Lab, I don't do as heavy background research. I perhaps do a quick Google around after seeing the flick, but nothing with the intensity of the Flick Lab episode. But the Flick Lab has kind of affected my movie watching or movie consuming habits, in the sense that since we watch so much, well, a kind of hard hitting stuff on the lab, I kind of don't have the energy to watch so much hard movies and artistic movies and abstract stuff outside of the lab anymore. So usually whenever we are on a break, which usually happens during summer and the Christmas breaks, I don't watch movies. I usually just watch age-old TV shows, or if I watch movies, I watch some absolutely mind-numbingly stupid, turn your brain off.
Adam Sandler.
That's a bridge I'm not willing to cross. Except Wedding Singer, I actually do think is pretty damn good.
Yeah, that's
from
great.
Adam Sandler.
American stuff is what you seem to gravitate towards on those breaks.
Yeah, a lot of American stuff. That's when I catch up on my Marvel.
Oh my.
And whatever has happened. Star Wars, easy to consume sci-fi trashy old 80s action movies. Not Die Hard, but like the Die Hard wannabes. Those are the kind of the fodder that I watch on breaks if I watch movies.
One of the best Christmas movies ever.
It's one of the best love stories I've seen.
Yeah. Right after what's the Arnold Schwarzenegger Christmas movie? Like My Father is a Turbo Man or whatever. It's great. What's your it's kind of odd question maybe, but what is your opinion on movies and has it changed? And what I mean is, you think they should be just something to take your mind off the horrible shit that goes on in the world, or should they always have some sort of a deeper meaning to you? What does movies sort of mean? Do they have a meaning beyond that they just keep you distracted for a while, or do you think they should have like a deeper meaning in them?
Well, yes and no. I think some of the best movies are the ones that you actually remember 5 minutes after leaving the cinema. So mostly that counts Marvel Gape shit out. I do enjoy movies with a meaning. They don't have to have an inherent meaning. It can only be about the visual style, even if it's something really artistic. If it speaks to you, fine, it speaks to you. We've had a lot of movies in this podcast that, are really on the border of you either enjoy it because you like it visually or just audiovisually, or you just don't. And it's purely about aesthetics.
Okay. Because you can't do this stuff sober.
Such a stupid question. You had to take a drink.
For me, actually, but the question is not stupid. The question actually is quite complex.
And here goes.
So here we go. See you 30 minutes later, guys. For me, movies, they haven't had like a complete turnaround. They haven't changed. There hasn't been like a 180-degree change in how I see movies. But movies have changed for me when doing this podcast. I used to be more liberal, perhaps more accepting with the whole idea of movies. I used to think that all movies basically can exist. No harm, no foul. No matter how bad or how insidious the film and its messaging would be. I used to think that it's okay. Because movies are basically they are works of fiction. That the context where the movies exist, it's a fictional context. So what's the harm? And while doing the podcast, I've kind of come into view that question. I've not necessarily changed my mind, but I have been asking myself that question a hell of a lot more. Because we have tackled some movies, some really, really bad and hateful flicks here on the podcast. Perhaps the most hurtful and the most dangerous one that we have covered would
Birth
be
of a Nation.
Birth of a Nation. And that's a film I didn't, if memory serves correct, I didn't call the movie to be banned nor censored, and I still don't believe in banning and censoring movies. No. But those are the times where I really have to ask, like, can a movie also be a dangerous tool?
Yeah.
To spread hateful messages? Because as I've done it, I kind of had the layman's understanding that movies are a form of making a connection between, you as a filmmaker and your audiences. And through that connection, the filmmaker can send a message to the audience. I kind of had a layman's understanding of that, this happens. I had a layman's understanding that, movies can be used as a tools of propaganda, etc. But I hadn't really tackled with the question before doing the Flick Lab. I hadn't really done the deep dive into how effective movies actually can be in portraying and conveying a message to somebody else. And that's actually something that the Flick Lab has changed for me. And to come to your second question, are movies always some deeper art? I actually do think that they are, even when they don't try to be, or when they don't try to have a message. I actually do think that they accidentally still have. It's something that we have talked about in the episode before, but in the movie audience sphere, in the recent years, we have had this cry for apolitical movies and apolitical art. We have had discussions about how political ideas in your art, be it movies, books, video games, what have it, how it actually ruins the product, and how people are craving for non-political video games and films. And in course of the Flick Lab, my point of view has grown stronger that there is no such thing as an apolitical art. Every piece of art, every film, they always carry some political message, even if they wouldn't say it out loud. But even in the basic framework of the film, it carries some type of a political message. There's good guys, there's bad guys. And already that framing is a political message. Who are the bad guys, who are the good guys? Dirty Harry 3 wouldn't need it says outright that homosexuals are the bad guys and Harry has to shoot them, gun them down. But even if it hadn't had that direct line, through visual messaging and implication, it was still ended up saying that. Much like the Dirty Harry as a franchise does not say that colored people are bad and white man should gun them down, but when you watch it, most of the criminals are, most of the street level thugs that end up being the cannon fodder for bank heist scene are colored. So there are always a political messaging going on in the film, even if you don't intend it.
Yeah.
And therefore, I actually do think that there is no really such thing as just plain for pleasure, just plain for entertainment political messaging. Karri mentioned Marvel cape shit, but Marvel cape shit itself also is it's a goddamn like it's a celebration of American exceptionalism, and it's a celebration of American values. It's a celebration of a black and white view of seeing the enemy. And I don't make the claim that cape shit is somehow, Marvel cape shit is somehow smart and deep cinema. No, it's popcorn movie fodder. Make no mistake. But even that still has a political message in its heart.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Disney propaganda.
Yeah.
It's also that. It's also corporate propaganda. It also sings the praise of the corporation that made to produce it.
Yeah. Sometimes we've discussed kind of lengthily what we should be allowed to be discussed in this podcast, or whether it's giving exposure to some things that we really wouldn't want to give exposure to, such as films like Cannibal Holocaust, where actual live animals are being tortured, or whether we want to discuss even Chinese propaganda films, whether that's somehow problematic, or propaganda films that are obviously propaganda films, not just under the surface. Something that I've tackled in this podcast is that at the end of the day, I see movies really always as some sort of an entertainment. And therefore, I think it begs the question, is it valuable for us to be discussing on and on and on about something that is very subjective? Is art, does talking about art mean anything, or is it just, because some people say that talking about movies is just retarded, it doesn't serve any purpose because it's so subjective. Could be. What I tried to do here originally, though, was to have something on the platter that is not so subjective, some kind of a factual aspects that we could find from the movies. But you quickly find that, yeah, it's also very, very hard to do that. And like Henrik kind of said there's no movie that doesn't have a perspective, really. Every movie is propaganda on some level. Even those war movies that we've discussed, a bunch of them, where it tries to frame it as such that it has like a neutral perspective on the events, and in that sense the camera wants to be only as a kind of an observer of things that did take place. But no, the way that you put your camera somewhere, that's already a statement. Everything's a fucking statement. So
yeah.
And another thing to throw into the pile is the aspect of movies and money, and how money corrupts movies. And yeah, there's a lot of films out there that just don't deserve a single moment of discussion. Maybe a short one on the aspect of how big money can ruin movies.
It's funny you brought that up because I had a question here that was, has there been any movies you would not review ever? And I think you brought up Cannibal Holocaust, which is of course a masterpiece.
It is.
We weren't
It
meant to
bloody
not.
well is.
We were meant to not discuss it, but then we discussed whether we should discuss it, and then we bloody well did.
I don't know if there is, at the end of the day, a movie that we would not necessarily review. But there are movies where I think that if we would be interested in covering them in the podcast, we would have to have a lengthy discussion. Should we do it or should we not? The closest example that I can give where we would have to have this discussion, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't do the episode.
Nazi propaganda documentaries?
Yeah. 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 Those would be like something like Lenny Riefenstahl's the Triumph of the Will. Like that would be. I'm not saying that's a no-go zone. I would refuse to do that episode. I would refuse to talk about that film. Not saying that, and I'm not saying that that's a film that we shouldn't necessarily cover in the podcast. But that's a film that, before we make the decision, we would have to have a long discussion about the question, should we actually do that? Because Karri mentioned the responsibilities that go into filmmaking. There's also a responsibility for us as a podcast hosts. That's something that I also learned when doing the Flick Lab. Because we also are content creators, and as content creators, we also put our ideas into whatever that is that the podcasts go.
Ether.
Ether. We put our ideas into the ether. And as such, we also do have like responsibility, like what are the ideas that we put there? What are the things that we will be discussing, and then through our discussion we enforce them in the ether. Like if we would make a Nazi documentary episode, which for the record, I'm not saying we shouldn't do or I would refuse to do it, but if we would do it someday, it would also partly it would be an act of us carrying over the legacy of those documentaries, and it would be us enforcing those documentaries, and in a way it would also us enforcing the intended legacy of the Third Reich. Even if we would, in the end, in the episode, we would tarnish those films. We would tear them down and we would say that they are horrible trash, whatever it is. But we would still do the act of carrying the torch for those films and spreading the word for those films. And in that part, we do have some responsibility.
Yeah, we have to have a point for that. Why are we discussing these movies?
Yeah. And that point would have to be contrasted against, like, what is the gamble that we are doing? What is the gamble that we are taking?
I actually know the answer deep down. We want some more listeners.
Well, then, by all means, let's do Nazi documentaries. But those films have an intended goal, or they had an intended goal implanted onto them by the Nazi regime.
Yeah.
And by giving now, even though the regime itself has ended, and you know, Hitler and Goebbels and all the yahoos, they are all long dead, but still they had an intent for the legacy. The Nazi documentaries were they were meant to be a part of the legacy of the 1,000-year Reich, and even though that Reich itself has ended, but the intended goal still exists in the framework of those films. They were supposed to be the torchbearers for the Reich. And if we shine a light on them now, we kinda are upholding the possibility of the legacy of those films having the legacy, and through the films there's some notion, some fantasy of the long lost Reich still having some strength.
Exactly, and I think it was disgusting how this Hitler impersonator Charlie Chaplin continued his horrible work all these years. Now, I had this fun question. This should be a quick one. So, if you had an unlimited budget and crew, you could do whatever you want, what sort of a movie would you make?
I had this idea that because I have not thought this completely through myself. I've just had these little inklings of what I would like to do, so I just thought about it. 2 minutes. It would be an escape movie. I would like to shoot it in Lisbon, and it would be something that first is an escape movie, but would evolve into more territories. It would be kind of a meditation piece about the meaning of life and the crumbling of authority for the young and poor people, the institutions crumbling down in their eyes, and also something about kindness received during hardships. So, kind of like all over the place. Yeah, that's what I feel like doing right now. Let's go, Henrik.
Okay, because my answer would have just been, pornographic religious giallo.
Hey.
Or a sequel to zombie strippers.
Hey, let's combine those.
I'm all game. I'm all game.
Let's
for
go.
that idea. I can write a script.
So, yeah, thanks for the answers. It's fucking great. so I thought this would be the longest question you would have to answer. I guess not.
Looks like we haven't quite figured this out.
Yeah.
If we would drop the podcast, then we would be like, oh, yeah, let's do something. 5 years go by. And no, not really finished yet.
Yeah, but it includes full frontal nudity and
Absolutely.
Escape from somewhere. Now, you've had some great guests on the show, and not so great, but we won't name them here. But yeah, but who would you like as a guest? And I would say, obviously, you could just choose. Oh, I want Leonardo DiCaprio, but let's stay in our demographic. We could reach actually, maybe. Is there some podcasters or movie reviewers you'd like to have on the show or something like that?
No, I'm content. I don't need to have anyone. Doesn't matter if it's Leo DiCaprio or like such some random guy that I met in a street and happens to be Korean, and it would be perfect for that Korean episode. Yeah, that actually happened. Yeah, no passions for guests right now.
That makes me feel welcome. Thanks, guys.
You're
No
welcome.
problem.
Yeah, I don't have any must-have guests here. In the past, our guests have been great. Well, except you of course.
yeah, of course.
But no, I have no bad word to say about our guests. As a guest, as persons, perhaps there are some political views I didn't exactly share with them, and on that regard they can burn in hell forever. Or like her, good riddance. But as guests, they have been. When we started, I kind of was like, oh yeah, we have to have like industry professionals and professors, film professors here as guests. Like that's the ticket. That's how we get good answers. But after X number of guests, I kind of saw the error of my ways. I was like, Yeah, but basically it's a quest per episode. In the end, you can't get a guarantee of a quality episode, even if it's an industry professional. Even if it would be, I don't know, your Kevin Smith or Martin Scorsese. You could have an interview and it would be absolutely terrible interview with them, and then the only thing that you would get out of it would be like the episode title, the possibility that you could say that we are interviewing Martin Scorsese.
Yeah, clickbait.
Yeah, the clickbait.
Yeah.
And that would be fun. But still, like, bad interview is a bad interview, and you can get a really good, really in-depth interview with just some guy that Karri found on the Philippines or wherever.
Who was forced to do a podcast.
Yeah. It's exactly that. I kidnapped him from the Starbucks and brought him home. But yeah, I'm of course happy to do those episodes going forward now that we have this kind of giving back mentality going on here. And we're going to do some of those indie films or what have you. And we'll be happy to have some filmmakers from those projects to come to us.
Yeah, and you always have me.
Oh gosh.
Also, we did touch on it a little bit on the Jeepers Creepers episode. That
there was a lot of touching there. Yeah.
yeah, by the director also. But we just touched about the fact that I was supposed to be doing this podcast originally. I think you asked me first to do this.
It's true.
This podcast, and you went to the second best after me, and
Henrik was the third one. Yeah.
so yeah, I remember I was sort of excited to join it. Then I think it was just I felt the lack of time to do the podcast, and I think what I've heard from everything you do before the podcast, I might have been right with the lack of time, but dodged a bullet there. But it is fun to show up once in a while when I can. I was supposed to do the Halloween Ends, but hurt my back and I was basically comatose for a while there. At least that's what I said. And well, it was a fun episode anyway. Now we've gone over an hour because this is such fun. We're gonna do sort of a quick fire round at the end where I ask just some short questions and short answers, please. But if somebody asked you advice, they want to start a podcast about movies, what sort of advice would you give them?
Don't do it.
Don't do it.
Yeah, exactly.
If I can't convince you not to do it, then please be damn sure that you hit the specific niche if you want any listeners. Be extremely original, and even then probably no one will find you.
Yeah.
That perhaps would be also my advice. Like at this point, it's easy to think that, oh my god, yeah, I'm going to start a podcast, I'm going to be super famous, then I'm going to get Patreon, and it's going to make me money, and then whatever, I'm going to buy a Chrysler or what have you.
No, that podcasting is not the moneymaker, really. There's very few podcasts that do that.
Yeah, podcasting is not the moneymaker. At this point, the podcasting itself, I don't know actually what to call it. There are podcasts like weeds. Everybody has a podcast, and at this point, like because podcasts have become so industrialized, it means that basically the competition is off the charts. Directors have podcasts, actors have podcasts, sound technicians have podcasts, and those podcasts can get directors and actors and sound technicians as their guests. So if you are just, upstart nobody, like me and Karri, Well, I'm sorry, but you kind of are shit out of luck. And, on top of that, the media empires, New York Times, the Boston Globe, what have yous, they all have podcasts. Podcasts, and they have the money to also invest on their podcasts. So, and with the money, they get guests and they get production value. So, I'm not saying don't do podcasts. I'm just saying, don't count your life on the podcast. Don't hang your dreams on, I'm gonna do a podcast and it's gonna be super super successful, and then I'm gonna have a Patreon, and then I'm gonna move out of my mom's house, because as evidently the odds are you are not gonna make it. Still paying rent to my mom for the basement.
Yeah.
I think Joe Rogan has given people false hope that podcasting could make you some money.
Joe Rogan and X number of other people, yeah. There was the heydays of podcasting, the golden age of podcasting, which is now years gone. I would say it was something like, 6 or 7 years, when podcasts were the new hot thing. And if you managed to hit it back then, you managed to be on the first wave, then good luck, you most likely your podcast was largely successful. But at this point, podcasts are like fucking YouTube channels. Everybody has a content channel, and there is a content channel for absolutely everything. Or podcasts are like Facebook profiles or emails. Everybody has one. You are more of a freak if you don't have a podcast at this point. So basically, the money value of podcasts has dropped.
Way too much saturation on the so-called market. So yeah, even if your product is amazing, as of course this is, they will not find you. People will not find you. They will rather go to the New York Times podcast, most likely.
Yeah, podcasts are great as a hobby and as a passion project, or if you have like some type of a goal you wanna have. Like I wanna preach to people to be more tolerant, then by all means do a podcast. But don't choose podcasting as a living, please.
But let's continue this quick firing questions.
Yeah.
No, these are not the quick fires yet.
Okay.
I'm just getting to it. But yeah, I think YouTube as a whole is a bad career choice. There's just those people who actually make it on YouTube, not to mention podcasts, it's a small amount of people who actually make it, and it's...
Yeah, and even if you're successful on YouTube, then the next day Google can decide that I think we're gonna demonetize you for some random reason, and then you've had to fight and nail and tooth for them for, I don't know, several months, years, until they maybe walk back on that decision, and you maybe get back your business. So in that sense, YouTubing is not really a career. It's just some additional income that can be subject to completely being cut off at any second.
Yeah, the PewDiePie profits are long gone at this point.
Yeah,
you can make a living in YouTube. That is a possibility for you, but like Karri mentioned, it's extremely flimsy, and you're constantly under Google's mercy. And the YouTube market also is completely oversaturated.
Yeah. I think that's why the great advice would be to, if you want to do YouTube videos or podcasts, whatever, if you, because you like to do it, then fine. Just don't expect anything, and you might get it, but I mean, just don't expect anything back from it.
Yeah, pretty much. And especially with podcasting, I think it's true what they say in some articles that if you have been out there for 2 years, doesn't mean a thing. 3 years, maybe you get somewhere. 5 years, still waiting.
Yeah. Well, maybe in 10 years we'll do this again, and we'll see where we are.
The pickup is a YouTube profile at that point. When you're doing some video shit.
With funny cat videos.
Yeah, probably. I've been kind of exploring that kind of things. Bring just stupid content on YouTube that just doesn't have any artistic merits or value or anything. It's just there in the YouTube shorts, like fun facts about women. Women are something.
You could do some pranks or whatever.
Yeah.
Flick Lab, the prank channel.
Jackass.
Now, we talked about Marvel and Disney, so I'd like to talk about Hollywood today and the amount of remakes, of course, but also just how bankrupt is Hollywood movies these days. And I think the ideas are just so bankrupt these days, and I think the remakes are a great point to make about that. Well, of course, there's a political issue that's driving the cause that they want to replace, let's say, Snow White with not so white snow, and all of these remakes with casting made purely based on the looks of the characters or people, and also I think very little anything new is coming out. Everything's ripped off from somewhere or remade or whatever. And
yeah, it's fucking tiresome. But then again, I've seen a lot of these so-called remakes, and I've had it. I don't need to watch them anymore. I don't feel like I'm missing out anything if I don't see the new version of Snow White, new version of Lion King, or whatever the case is. But people seem to gravitate towards them, so okay, more power to them. Disney seems to be doing what people want to see. Fine, but it's just recycling ideas that were kind of dear to us 20 years ago, 30 years ago when we were kids, and now they're just there again. Idea-wise, bankrupt. Is it making bank? Yeah. Would I watch it? Fuck no. So...
yeah, I don't actually see that as a too big of a problem. Mostly because it's a problem that Hollywood has always had. They have done it's the remakes now. They are just a new phase on the old problem. Before this, it was the constant sequels, which were basically the first film just remade. Your Home Alone 2s, Home Alone 3s, what have you. The casts have always been chosen by the looks. Just look at the career of Steven Seagal, who couldn't act for the life of him, but happened to look like a badass. So good luck. A career for you. Look at the early years of Van Damme, who barely got, managed to speak English, or Arnold Schwarzenegger, who just happened to be...
Guys, it's not even really about the sequels themselves or remakes. It's even the style in which those films are made. Even something like Oppenheimer. I mean, the subject in itself is interesting. I haven't seen the movie, but I plan to see it in a week if it's still in the theaters here. Just the kind of the trailer-esque visuals that go to the Hollywood filmmaking these days, they are all, as we I guess say in Finland, carved from the same wood. Style-wise, pace-wise, structure-wise. You kind of know what to expect. Going to the movies is kind of boring nowadays.
Yeah, but again, going to the movies has always been kind of boring.
Oh yeah?
That's been the problem. Because Hollywood also has done the exact same thing. Like you talk about, mentioned the visual language of Oppenheimer, the trailer-esque visual language of the movies of these days. That's not a new problem either. That's kind of always been there. Much in the same way, like we had that wave of the teenage slasher films following Scream, which was followed by the American remakes of Japanese horror films at one point. Now Hollywood is remaking its own cartoons as live-action features. Like it's a constant shit show. It's been there in for decades.
Yeah.
The Disney live action remake phase is nothing more. It's a new paint job on an old problem, which is the fact that Hollywood has always been ideally bankrupt. We have the occasional golden age,
Yeah.
which usually is a result of some type of a catastrophe inside of Hollywood. Hollywood movies did not make money. They were not. People didn't go see Hollywood prime prestige dramas. So Hollywood invented Oscars. Well, the intention flopped again, but there happened to be a few really prestigious drama directors like your Michael Ciminos. So Hollywood came up with the next plan, like, we give these directors unlimited budgets. That's when you get your Heaven's Gates and your Apocalypse Nows and etc. Except those films managed to bankrupt Hollywood. So Hollywood was once again crumbling within itself. And in that almost bankrupt stage of Hollywood, we get now the auteur directors, which is the time era of Scorsese's and what have you. So we are just riding the wave, and now Hollywood is coming to a second bankruptcy once again. The films are flopping, that the way how Hollywood operates, the business scheme is no longer working. Your Oppenheimers are not making enough money to bankroll the other films, so Hollywood itself is financially unsustainable at this point.
I think
it's going to have to change, and we're going to get another golden age at some point.
Yeah, idea-wise, totally corrupted and bankrupt. But what I think I see over the years is just the constant fine-tuning and tweaking, the fine-tuning and fine-tuning and fine-tuning of every single thing, so that you can keep the terrible attention span of modern viewers, especially. Just fine-tune all the things that seem to work, so that you can maximize your potential for bank. That's about it. I suspect that this is getting worse and worse now that we have AI. We're gonna get some nice suggestions from the AI how the structure of the movie should go, so that we keep the attention and get reviews.
Yeah, I actually, I do think that that's going to lead us into a temporary dark age with Hollywood, the AI technology. But I don't think it's going to forever change the Hollywood films.
Yeah.
It's going to slump once again. There's going to be another financial crisis in Hollywood, and then they are going to somehow once again ditch the AI. I strongly believe it. AI, I look at AI in very much the same way as was the CGI renaissance in Hollywood films, where every single movie would have like a godless amount of CGI. And now we have like movies like Oppenheimer and directors like Nolan who are celebrated for the fact that they refuse to use CGI and are using practical effects. So it's kind of like Hollywood likes to go on a turbo drive on one thing, and it drives it as long as it can, as hard as it can, and then it just completely fumbles it. It's a flaming dumpster fire at the end, which is the point when Hollywood once again kind of reforms itself and somehow fixes itself. Yes. And we once again get a couple of years of good movies as a result.
Yeah, I guess the cycle involves just forgetting that the story is king. You kind of forget that, and then you think the CGI or whatever the storytelling tools are the most important thing. Phase, and then it comes back around again. That actually I think we should concentrate on stories and use the AI and the CGI and whatever different storytelling tools you have as kind of the supporting tools to tell your story. But God forbid, I think we're gonna have directed by ChatGPT 4.
Don't forget about that.
Yeah. Could be.
3D era with fucking Saw 3D. Friday the 13th was in 3D. Just fucking horrible.
Yeah.
I think we can now go to the quick fire rapid questions.
Okay, bring it.
And start with the obvious ones, and I know it's always hard to choose just one, but let's start with favorite movie.
Oh no.
I don't have one.
Next.
Impossible question. Next.
Yeah.
Do you wanna kind of put some more, some genre or some more detail on that question? Maybe I could try something. Let's move on.
I'll leave the thinking to you.
Zombie strippers. Next.
Favorite movie you've seen this week?
Favorite movie.
Would be. I only seen Oppenheimer, so I'm gonna jump straight ahead into Oppenheimer camp. It's actually, honestly, also a pretty good movie.
Okay.
Not necessarily like. I'm not promising to Karri that it will forever change his life. And I make no guarantees that Karri necessarily wouldn't be disappointed by the flick, because at the end of the day, is a Hollywood biopic of a historically important man. But I hugely liked it.
Okay. During the last week, what have I been even watching? I did watch the TV series Heartstopper. Let me just consult on my letterboxd if I marked anything here worth of interest. Well, I did watch the Clint Eastwood movie In the Line of Fire, and I thought it was kind of shit.
That's the favorite one.
I know, hot take, I know. I also watched for the first time Steven Spielberg's Munich, and I was like, yeah, well, not good enough. Thanks for trying, though. Thanks for trying. So, that's about it.
Okay. Well, great fucking answer. Okay, maybe this is a bit easier. Favorite genre of movies?
Not very easy.
I guess at the end of the day, horror for me. I think it's most of the horror films, by God, they are shit and absolute trash. I'm not denying that. A horror film is plagued by bad examples, but I do think that it is the genre that has the most potential, because horror deals with fantasy. So, and in that fantasy framework, you can basically deal with any topic, and you don't have to restrict yourself into things like realism or presentation or anything else. You can go as wild as you want.
True.
Well, I used to love mainly horror movies, but I think after those movie festival thingies that we had about 10 years ago, I just kind of, if that's fair to say, kind of outgrew most of horror films, because it started to get so goddamn hard to find good horror movies, where I was at the point that I'm not really even happy with these movies that we selected for the event. So it doesn't have to be, slasher movies, of course, but I got tired of the violence that comes with it most of the time, and most of it is shit. But when there's some good horror, all game for that. I don't really have a favorite genre per se, but I hugely seem to enjoy escape movies, escape from prison escape from the police, whatever. I enjoy the chase.
Do you feel like you are trapped in your life?
I'm
anti-authority, I guess, a bit. Always been.
My next question actually would have been, what are you running from? Now, I have to say about horror, it's also my favorite genre, and I think the good thing about horror is I like even the shitty ones, so there's a lot to like. In your perfect world, this is a bit odd, but who would win, Freddy or Jason?
Freddy, of course.
Freddy, natural.
Jason is a copy of a copy of a copy character.
I will not have this slander in my podcast. Guilty pleasure movie.
James Cameron's Avatar.
Oh, shit.
No, actually, Prometheus. Prometheus is even more guilty pleasure for me, because Prometheus I can watch a second time. But Avatar was so goddamn mind-numbingly boring. Avatar would be hate watching. But guilty pleasure, Prometheus.
Definitely Mission Impossible 2.
Yeah, it's quite fun.
Let's go with that.
I think I'm gonna go with the Adam Sandler movies. Best soundtrack on a movie.
Best. The aforementioned Mission Impossible 2 does have a freaking solid soundtrack. I've always said that. Hans Zimmer on fire, so that's one. And I also love a lot of Hans Zimmer, surprise, surprise. I love the Last Samurai soundtrack. Absolutely gorgeous.
Also with Tom Cruise.
Also with Tom Cruise, yeah. What else? From James Bond, of course, it's easy to pick something. Let's say... actually, Live and Let Die. It's not done by John Barry, who usually does the soundtracks. It was done by the ex-Beatle guy, George Martin. That's such a fun soundtrack. Just so playful and energetic and awesome.
I was gonna go with a Last Caution and Alexandre Desplat altogether, but since Karri mentioned Hans Zimmer, I think in all respect to Karri, I have to pick one of his favorite directors here. So I will go with Interstellar.
Oh my god. At least I remember it has a lot of horns. You seem to love them, Henrik.
me and Hollywood, and how could the two of us be wrong?
A la Inception.
Inception horns. After that scene in every single trailer.
Every single trailer.
What about our favorite director?
I honestly can't pick this one either.
Well, who's the goddamn director of the... That helped you quite a lot, let me see.
Oh yeah.
I don't know, but there's a lot of indie or artsy directors that I do like. If I would have to pick something from the mainstream, I guess David Fincher is one of those directors that just has a really hard time of delivering a bad movie. So let's say David Fincher.
Has managed to still do that.
Yeah.
The Game.
Actually, I did kind of like that.
Also known as The Snooze.
No, I'd like your opinion on this, but I would say the greatest. Oh, well, not the greatest, but favorite director is Quentin Tarantino. I don't think there's any movies that I don't like from him.
I think there's plenty of movies that I don't like from him.
Yeah, moving on.
Yeah, next question.
Yeah, I don't like where this is going. Now, how about a favorite writer?
Huh? Honey Rider. What are we talking about?
Screenplay writers.
Oh.
What the fuck did you hear? Like a horse rider or what?
Yeah.
English isn't my native language, if you haven't noticed.
Yeah, it's definitely mine. I will give this to Dominic Othnan Girard of Halloween 5 fame.
I once again, it's impossible to actually name just one, because like with directors, or like with everybody else, you can get a whole bunch of great work and then nobody ever lands on just a pure home run. Everybody has one move, at least one thing that's not perfect.
Except
Nothing else when compared to, their previous ones. And go ahead, Karri.
Thank you. Because nothing compares to, are you ready? For the Finnish film adaptation of Terminator 2. That guy was pretty good.
Well, we can't talk about that since, that director slash writer did only one movie.
Yeah.
But I don't know. If, on top of my head, perhaps Aaron Sorkin.
Once again, I have to save this and say Stephen King or Wes Craven. But yeah, I think that's about it for my quick fire round. Now it was very quick. Some last minute thoughts about you have any special thanks to give from this journey of yours through 5 years?
I would like to thank God and alcohol and my mom. Not necessarily in that order.
No, because your mom is not listening to the podcast, right?
Neither is God.
but they're bankrolling my stay in mom's basement. And that's a hell of a lot in this game.
Of course, we're thankful for our guests. Magda Hutnu has been here a couple of times, our Polish guest, extremely well researching person. Anas, Mitch Dam, Annie, we can't spend a lot of time on everyone. So, Bayaman and Kenny in that Kyrgyzstani episode, they were really funny. I just remember some moments. They would really go out of their way to make people laugh, so appreciate that. Sebastian, Tom Frankland, Taiki Yoshikawa, Sho Watanabe, Onjay Sedlar, more or less, I can't pronounce Czech for the life of me. Daniel Tarade, Annika Groff, Joon Tervakari, Runar Thor, Asker Sigurdsson, Alistar Pitts, Mladen, Jana, Nezar Andari, Alison Kilkenny, Zachary Bird, Petro from Plan Sequence, fantastic episode, Nick Vakey and Luke Liu from Mint Volcano. They're gonna be in the next episode, so stay tuned to that. Yeah. And Zachary, of course, as our ex-host, thank you very much for your contributions. And somebody called Aku Mäkelä. And
who is that?
I don't know.
Must be a fluke mistake.
Last but not least, Heli Sandström. Thank you for tuning in and being in one of our episodes as well.
Now, closing to the end. In your opinion, what's your greatest achievements of all of this massive success? What would you say is your greatest achievement yet?
Managing not to kill myself.
To keep it going, to have 471k views in the Gods must be crazy. Even though that listeners probably left the video at the 1 minute mark or 30 seconds. Yeah, just to actually keep it going, that's the biggest achievement for 5 years.
From my end, it would have to be the people that we have managed to get as our guests.
Well, that's the sweetheart approach to say, yeah.
Yeah, and for technicality, that also has to include you, Aku. But
Yeah.
I don't know. In all honesty, I'm actually extremely proud of the guests that we have managed to get and the episodes that we have managed to produce whenever we have had guests. And honestly, that also includes the Jeepers Creepers episode, which I do think, Aku, all joking and shit talking aside, I think that episode would have sucked so much ass because of the film in question if you wouldn't have, joined us during the recording, and helped us to store the funny stuff and the jokes, because with Jeepers Creepers, what are you going to talk about? You're going to make jokes and talk about, the director's criminal past and sentencing.
Yeah.
And that's it. So,
And that's what we did also, yeah.
but it would have been even more, it would have sucked as an episode.
Yeah.
If we wouldn't have had the jokes, and that's where we actually needed you very much. So thank you for that. And on top of that, our success, I honestly do think, and this is once again self-grandizing opinion from my end, I think that we have, not in every single episode, but way more than once in course of our podcast history, we have actually managed to have pretty good and pretty in-depth discussions on things surrounding cinema and the movies that we are covering. And we have managed to make pretty damn managed to gather pretty damn good insight into the films that we are covering. So I do think that there are some real bangers in our catalog.
Yeah.
And some actually really heart-to-heart good discussions.
And I have to say that this list of guest thank yous is not complete. Something weird is happening with the list of guests that I have, and there's people missing, like Matt from The Gods Must Be Crazy, thank you, and everyone else that I forgot.
But most importantly, me, and you already said me.
Naturally.
So
like I said, you kind of saved the Jeepers Creeper episode, honestly.
I don't know about that. I remember I was laying on my stomach, and I think I heard it from the recording that I couldn't get my voice out as much as I wanted to. But whatever, still smashed it.
Yep.
Like the content at the end of the day is always king. That the sound quality and everything else is production value. But you can have all the production value you want. You can have all the money in your podcast that you want, and the content can still be shit. Or you can be in a low-end microphone in extremely hard recording space, but the content can still be gold. It's much like with stories and script writing in movies. In podcasts, the content is king.
Yeah.
And I'll be sure when I make millions, I will never offer you money because you would never take it. You want to keep this authentic and real, and I applaud you for that.
Yeah, you keep the money to yourself, Satan.
Now the bigger question is, well, maybe we touched on that too, about future plans for the podcast.
Yeah. Well, I think there's still some more avenues where we can take the podcast, and currently we've been exploring this thankful path of just kind of going back, like we're gonna bring Mint Volcano back to the podcast to just talk about their projects, which could be really nice. And I think we're gonna talk about some more indie films going forward. That's what I would love to do, and then to just bring the content. Sorry, God forbid, let's not say content. Let's say, bring these artists to the studio to talk about their work.
Yeah, giving back might be the nicest thing that we have actually managed to do with the podcast. Outside of that, I don't know, like, it kind of depends on how me and Karri are gonna feel about, continuing the podcast, 200 episodes plus. If we ever, if it honestly starts to feel like that the 200 episode will be some type of a closing mark for the podcast, we just feel that we don't have the drive anymore to push ourselves past the 200th episode. In that case, I'm all for us, and I think we should, just do one extremely crazy thing still.
Yeah.
Somehow, whatever it is, like pushing out the podcast on some completely new platform, or I don't know, taking a distribution deal for weird Hungarian porn films or something like that. But whatever the heck, like, if it's like, if at some point it honestly starts to feel like and look like that we are entering the twilight episodes of this podcast, and we are fairly certain that the end that we are going to just close the doors. In that case, let's just go crazy once more. See if that leads us into some place, and if we crash and burn, what? Then what? We were gonna close the doors anyways.
I totally agree with that, Henrik, that we should still take you through the thick forests of gay porn and Nazi documentaries, Nazi propaganda documentaries.
We can combine the two of them. We can make gay porn that Nazi documentary.
Find some similarities in those.
And also, I think you could take a play from the book of Cannibal Holocaust and just slaughter animals during your podcast.
Oh.
Hey, why not? we are still gonna close the doors, so why might close them for good.
I've recorded the podcast once from a boat, ring-a-ding-a rowboat, as Henrik said, whatever that means. And I think we should bring the value of crazy back to the podcast for sure. I remember that like the first 20 episodes, there's some insane stuff going on there. So back to the roots.
Yeah. Perhaps like the next cannibal episode, we can actually try and taste human meat.
Gonna munch on my own arm.
Yeah, like fucking hell, that's going to be like a YouTube placeholder image.
Oh yeah. Well, that's about all my questions there. You got something to say?
Got something to say?
That's quite threatening.
Well,
something to fucking say.
Well, you can find us online, if you didn't guess that. For some reason, we are still on these satanic platforms: Facebook, Instagram, YouTube,
Pornhub.
Yeah. Also,
we actually could upload the episodes to Pornhub. Well, why shouldn't we? It's a content platform.
3 guys fuck the listeners for 2 hours.
that would be that would be it.
Shit.
all right.
Just throwing out ideas. Yeah.
Any closing thoughts from your end, or?
From my rear end. Yeah. Well,
Where's the fire?
no, it's been a fun ride. I've been a part of 2 of those rides, and it's been quite fun both of the times. And I do think listening to your podcast, at least lying that I do, it doesn't feel like it's something that everybody else is doing. There is something more to it than just recycling, same old shit. And I think it might be the
Finishness.
the amount of
Cocaine.
and, the alcohol, the Nazi jokes. Also, maybe the amount of background work that goes into it. It's not I don't think it blends into the mass, but just that many people haven't just found it yet. There's so many. There are so many to choose from. So it's hard to compete, even if you are somehow different from everybody else. It's still hard to compete, sort of say.
Right. Yeah. I think there's some kind of a down-to-earth nature about our podcast that you don't really find all the time. Something where we just, we say it how it is while still staying respectful about it, I believe. As long as you can, ride our sense of humor.
Yeah, respectful is a strong word, but something like that. Yes. But I do think it's a good project, and we still have 24 episodes to figure this shit out before you go out there.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, to be as contradictory as possible, I will just say if we get like $1,000 a month from our Patreon page, yeah, I'm game. Let's continue the podcast.
I don't know if I can pay you that much, but maybe half.
So yeah, keep that in mind, dear listeners.
Yeah, Mom.
No, it's not gonna come from Mom's pocket for sure.
No. But yeah, it's a good thing. Keep it going for at least 24 episodes.
Yeah, or 24 minutes more.
Yeah, yeah. But this was a great hour-long show once again.
Over 2 hours.
Yeah.
So next time, yeah, we're gonna discuss Mint Volcano with our friends Nick Grivell and Luke Liu. These are a Taiwanese-based film production company, and they also have a YouTube channel where they do movie reviews related to Taiwanese cinema and largely a bit touching on Asian cinema. So yeah, that's what's up next.
Actually, looking forward to that discussion, because they are great guys.
Absolutely. Hey, if you made it this far, thank you for joining us. And I'll see you with Henrik and Luke Liu and Nick Grivell in a fortnight.
Until then.
No, ja. Lässytilää. Kaikki pyörii täällä päässä.
Joo, sama juttu.
Pyörii lähinnä päässä.
Joo.
Suosittelen laittaa Google-kuvahakuun Swamp Assi.
Haepa ööli sieltä. Poistu kaapista. Mulla on kahvia tossa. Kahvimiehen tiellä pitää.
Se on se absoluutisti vaihtoehto.
Ei oikein vatsa kestä ton kovempia huumausaineita.
Ei se mitään, se on ihan hyvä. Kahvi on porttihuume, se johtaa kovempia aineita.
Huomenna maistuukin jo crack-kokaiinissa.
Niin on. Tästä on maitolla, tästä se lähti.
Sano jotain.
Miten me aloitetaan? Sä toivottavasti kuulet läpi tän. Sitten ja tiedät kun loppuu. Sitten käynnistyy varmaankin. No okei.
Yes.
Joo, joudut lopettaa englantiin ihan just. Okay, yeah, so that was the theme music.
Yeah. Welcome to Flick Lab episode 1. I'm Karri and my...
The one we start off apparently pretty strangely just stealing the sound landscape from Blade Runner.
Did I? Actually...
In a world with thousands of movie podcasts, there can be only one with these particular hosts, with these analyses. Rigorously accurate, brutally honest. This summer, the Flick Lab, the all-new podcast, starting August 14th.